All right, Richard Hendrix, former Alabama great, with us now on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. You've heard him some on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, see him on the SEC Network as well. What's up, Richard? How are you today?
Doing great, guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, we appreciate you coming on. Look, even if I told you Brandon Miller was held scoreless, you probably would not have Wednesday or Thursday morning said, ooh, Alabama may lose the game. But if I had told you Brandon Miller was held scoreless, would you have been surprised they scored 96 in a win?
Well, I definitely would have been surprised to hear that they scored that much, but it doesn't surprise me that they win the game. You know, Alabama is a very, very strong team with a lot of depth. And like I've said so many times before, the maturity of this roster, for them to be able to pick it up when you have your star player to not score any points, it speaks volumes of this team. I've been on a lot of really good teams in my career, and to see so many players who understand their role and can pick it up and to play regardless of the minutes they get, it's phenomenal, and Alabama looks to be rolling.
You know, and you talk about that depth. I mean, Nick Pringle yesterday, 19 off the bench. How good was he? That matches a season high.
Well, you know, I've spoken his praises all season long. You know, when you see him to come off the bench in some games, he plays a limited role. He's always productive. He understands his role. He's strong under the boards. He brings a physical nature that no other player on the team has. Every time you see when he gets close to the basket, he's trying to throw it down with authority, with power dunks. And that's what Alabama needs. But, you know, for me, the most impressive thing about what this staff has done, when you have 10, 11 deep on your roster, the psychological aspect of how you keep players engaged on a talented team to continue to bring their best game in limited minutes, I think is a phenomenal thing about the staff, and you can see it really coming to fruition here in the playoffs.
How are you going to come on here and say you've been singing the praises of Pringle all year long? I'm the Pringle guy. I'm the guy. Come on, Richard. Come on. No, I know you have, and you've been spot on with what he does. Namari Burnett and Gurley, those guys, you're just talking about how hard it is to stay engaged when you're playing sometimes 11 deep, and they don't have the same role. In some games they don't play at all, in some games they do. Namari had a great game shooting yesterday. What could he add to this team down the stretch if he gets more minutes and his shot keeps falling like that?
Confidence. I think when you're a player that comes off the bench, you have to understand you have a short leash to do what you have to do, but you have to be confident in yourself when you step into the game. I think that is the biggest thing that you see from Namari Burnett and Noah Gurley, is that they believe in their abilities. And when they come right into the game, they understand the defensive scheme. They step into strong roles. They rebound well in their areas. And when they get a clean look, they're not afraid to let it fly. And you see yesterday, they knocked it down with confidence. And that's what Alabama's going to need moving into these next games, because you got to have the play versatility and the depth and the confidence from the bench.
Richard Hendrix with us, former Alabama great. We'll talk some of the SEC teams with him, but primarily, obviously, Alabama. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. I do want to ask you about Mark Sears, a guy, if I had the numbers right, I think he was 3 of his last 22 shooting from beyond the arc, and he made 3 3-pointers in like a 90-second span there. You were just talking about confidence, Richard. How big is that for him to get, just kind of get going? 3 out of 4 from beyond the arc isn't like an amazing night, but it was positive for him.
I think it's huge. I was able to check him out at the SEC tournament in Nashville, and as you mentioned, he'd been struggling from shooting from the outside, and he still is stepping into his shot with a lot of confidence. In the SEC championship game, he was able to knock down some big ones early on, and you could see that that's what he needed to get going. I believe he started to turn the corner in that final, and now he's able to shoot well in the opening round game. But he's an X factor for this team. Everyone's going to key in on Brandon Miller, but, he's a really good 1-2 punch to what Brandon Miller brings to the table. And all season long, Mark Sears has really been able to knock down shots and take advantage of the role that he has. He struggled a little bit of late, but if he can get back into form with him and Quinterly, with their playmaking ability, their speed, creativity on the outside, they're definitely going to make things much more difficult for opposing defenses, regardless of who the matchup is.
If Alabama's going to make that deep run, Final Four, possibly championship, what do you think is more important? Again, they scored 96, and they're good, both ends of the court. But what do you think ultimately would get Alabama to Houston? Is it the offense or the defense?
Well, it has to be the defense, because teams, when you run against different teams that are in this bracket, they're going to have a different play style. The recipe against Alabama has tried to be to slow the game down. And if they can slow the game down and muddy the game up, then that definitely makes things more difficult on Alabama. If you allow Alabama to get it off the boards, get in transition, get numbers in their advantage and knock down open threes, you're going to have some problems because Alabama can hit 3 threes in a row and there's a 9-point lead that really breaks the game open. So when teams try to slow it down and make this a grind out game, that makes it a challenge. But when Alabama can lock down defensively and keep the other team from scoring, then that's what they're going to need to win games. I think that Bediako has been doing an outstanding job of anchoring the defense down low. His defensive transition of getting back into the paint and keeping teams, from getting into the paint is going to be a big thing for Alabama.
We talked Auburn in the first segment, a lot of Alabama with you. I want to jump to the other SEC teams with you. 5-1 yesterday. Missouri, Tennessee, and Arkansas winning. Let's start with Missouri. You've told us about how offensively this team can get hot, and it looked that way yesterday with Hodge and Brown. That was a popular upset pick that Missouri was going to lose that game. They didn't lose. They won that game 76-65. What did you think of Missouri?
I don't know why people think it's a popular upset. I mean, if you've been watching the Tigers all year long, they have a great coach in Dennis Gates, and they play a style of defense that really extends their defense out onto the court, which disrupts a lot of teams' offensive timing. Kobe Brown, in my opinion, is one of the best players in college basketball, well-deserving of a first-team All-SEC performer, and really, quite frankly, in the last few games, is really playing himself into the NBA. He could be a potential first-round NBA pick at 6'8", 250 pounds. The versatility that he has to shoot it from the outside, he can rebound, he can defend multiple positions. He's a matchup problem. So with him on the court, him and Demoy Hodge with a beautiful 1-2 punch on the inside and outside, they really pose some problems to a lot of teams. I've had Missouri going to the Sweet 16. I think they're going to be a hard out with their defensive pressure that they put on teams. I think they're a really good team.
Richard Hendrix with us for a few more moments on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Tennessee won in a rock fight. Tennessee is accustomed to winning in rock fights, but they're kind of having to do it because of injury right now. It's not just the style they want to play. They're almost forced into that. And I don't get the feel, Richard, that it's a formula probably that can even get them past Duke.
Well, I agree with you. I didn't pick them to even get past Louisiana in the first round. That's just how much I believe in Zakai Ziegler. I think he is a phenomenal point guard. Probably the best point guard in the SEC as far as organizing the team and setting the tone defensively. But as you mentioned, they had to play by committee yesterday of getting the ball up the court. Had a dogfight with Louisiana in the end of the game. Louisiana was not able to get over the hump. But Tennessee is a very talented team. If Tennessee is going to continue to advance, they're going to have to lean on their defense and definitely show their defensive ability, which they do have. If they can do that and hit some outside shots, then they can be a force. But it's going to be tough without Ziegler running the show.
A&M got beat badly by Penn State, but Arkansas beats Illinois by 10. They just look more athletic. Does Arkansas have a chance against Kansas, in your opinion?
They do. I think that Kansas will pull it out. Kansas, obviously, without Bill Self or in what capacity he will be leading the team, plays a role for the continuity and adjustments that they might be making on the bench. But Arkansas, I've said all season long, is the one team in the SEC that has the same level of talent as Alabama. I've talked to a lot of my NBA scout buddies when I was at the SEC tournament. They said Arkansas has at least 4 pros on that roster. Now, there's no correlation between NBA prospects and college success. But I will say, if they can get it to click in March, which Eric Musselman's teams have been doing for the last couple of years by making it to back-to-back Elite Eights, they're definitely a tough team to play against, and they looked really good yesterday against Illinois. So they have the talent. If they can pull it all together, it'll be a tough one for Kansas. So Arkansas is always dangerous.
It would be tough, Richard, to find a bigger gap between the way opponents play than what Auburn is going to have to do. Iowa, high-powered offensive team, doesn't play a ton of defense. Houston, great defensive team. They want to play a low-scoring game. I mean, it is a tough transition for Bruce Pearl and Auburn from round 1 to round 2.
Huge transition for Auburn, but, I wasn't in attendance in Birmingham yesterday, but I've had a couple of games of Auburn on the call this year. And one thing with Auburn, the fans for the Tigers are definitely going to come and bring another dimension to their team. They play well, obviously, at home in Neville Arena. And from the looks of it, it looked like the BJCC or Legacy Arena was almost like Neville Arena, Birmingham.
Yep.
And they're going to be having the crowd running to Naro. It's going to be rowdy when they get a chance to play in the second round. I think with Sasser, a little bit beat up a little bit. I have Auburn going to the Sweet 16. I think they're just that good. They have some talented players. They've been inconsistent. Janai Broome, 19 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks in the opening game. I think he's a high-quality big in college basketball who's been able to impose his will. If he can have that same type of impact in the second round, I don't see any reason why Auburn, with that home court advantage, because that's what it is, playing in Birmingham, can definitely move forward against a Houston team that seems a little bit gimpy.
Both Alabama and Auburn in the same session, though, so it'll be interesting to see how it's divided up ticket-wise for Saturday's contest. Maryland is Alabama's opponent after the Auburn game with Houston in 8:40 tip. This Maryland team's a lot more athletic, obviously, than Corpus Christi was. Do they remind you any of a certain SEC team the way Maryland plays at all? And what do you think of the Tide against the Terps?
Well, when I look at them, I don't know if I see any other SEC team that they remind me of, but I think it's going to be in Alabama's court. I think if you look at what Alabama's been doing the entire season, they've been able to make any adjustments against any certain style of team. May it be teams that have bigger, slower players that slow it down, against teams that want to run faster plays, that have smaller guards that like to shoot from the outside. They have the versatility to make the adjustment. So I think with Alabama, the comfort in which they had in the last game, winning the game with everyone contributing, I think I would expect Brandon Miller to get back to his A game, to be a contributor in this game, and also with the momentum that all the other players have, Nick Pringle, Gurley, Namari Burnett coming off the bench, Javon Quinterly doing his thing, with the momentum that everyone has coming from the first game and from the SEC tournament, I think they should be able to take care of Maryland. This is a big opportunity for Alabama basketball. You obviously have a chance for them to do something historic, 30 wins on the season, the most they've ever done. And I think Alabama understands what's in front of them. They can get a chance to the Final Four with some upsets here in this bracket, and it seemed to be shaping up very nice. And for me, when I look at Nate Oates and what he has in front of him, an opportunity to really establish himself as one of the premier college basketball coaches in this new era of college basketball. With the old guard retiring and moving forward, this is really an opportunity for Alabama basketball to take advantage of the changing tide of college basketball. And Nate Oates can be one of the leaders in that, and Alabama basketball can be a face.
Exceptional stuff. Richard Hendrix at rhendrix35. You see him on the SEC Network, and Alabama great as well. Richard, thank you very much for the time. We always appreciate it.
Thank y'all for having me. Enjoyed it.
All right, buddy. Take care. Richard Hendrix with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Great breakdown of what we saw yesterday.